Keir Starmer walked in thinking this would be a calm, polite back and forth, the kind where everyone nods and pretends to agree.
Of Keir Starmer's attacks on freedom of speech.
It's exactly what you'd expect from someone who holds his position. It's nothing new. I think in the UK, things have gone farther in the UK on the, what would you say, with regards to threats to freedom of expression than maybe anywhere in the West, although Canada's doing its best to play catch-up, maybe New Zealand. It's in keeping with his ethos. It's not surprising, and it's appalling.
That illusion shattered fast when Jordan Peterson stepped into the conversation, armed with razor-sharp logic, non-stop energy, and vocabulary that hit like a mental overload. Within minutes, Starmer looked like a buffering screen trying to explain socialism without tripping over his own points. This wasn't standard politics anymore. It felt like a high-level lecture crashing headfirst into prime-time spectacle, and only one side came ready to dominate the room. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when a thinker pulls apart a politician's entire belief system piece by piece, this was that moment unfolding in real time. Somewhere behind the polished walls of Downing Street, Starmer comes off like a man trying to run a nation with the presence of office paperwork and the passion of reheated tea. Then there's Jordan Peterson, not physically there, but looming large like an intellectual storm cloud, sharp, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Every weak point in Starmer's leadership got exposed, each argument stripped down until it felt like a live lesson in how not to command authority.
Surprise you that Keir Starmer doesn't want a national inquiry into grooming gangs?
No, that doesn't surprise me. It's exactly what you'd expect. I've got an article coming out in the Telegraph this week about exactly that issue, and so it's appalling. Well, there's hard questions that need to be asked about and answered about multiculturalism, and no one's willing to have the discussion. But it needs to be had, obviously. And I think there's maybe a way forward with regards to the signatories of the Abraham Accord to have a serious discussion about how Islamic fundamentalism might be brought under control and some vision of how...
Now picture Britain as a ship drifting through rough waters, the crew uneasy, the direction unclear, and the leadership struggling to grab the wheel. At the wheel stands Captain Starmer, squinting hard at an imaginary handbook called Generic Leadership for Beginners, trying to move forward without upsetting a single soul on board. He's steering carefully, cautiously, almost nervously, while Jordan Peterson shouts from the solid ground of logic and structure, asking the obvious question: does anyone here even know where this ship is headed? Growth gets promised loudly, but when you pop the hood, there's nothing driving it forward.
The state of morality in Britain that grooming gangs were taking place for more than 3 decades.
You know, that's what happens when a naive, demented, and self-righteous multiculturalism takes the upper hand, and when the upper class is willing to sacrifice the poor to their own moral presumptions. Yeah, it's appalling in every possible way. And it indicates, it's indicative of something truly hideous beneath the surface, not only on the rape gang side, but obviously on the side of the authorities that conspired to keep it a secret. Dreadful.
Starmer's identity crisis isn't temporary, it's baked into the brand. One day, he's selling himself as the bold champion of everyday people. The next, he's buffing up his centrist image like a prized briefcase pulled from storage. He switches stances so often it feels less like leadership and more like a performance with no fixed steps. And let's be clear, this isn't flexibility, it's mental snapback. Peterson, a guy known for boiling human behavior down into clear rules and relentless accountability, would look at Starmer's political acrobatics and label it a live case study in avoiding hard answers. If clarity had a price tag, Starmer's balance would be sitting at 0. His policies feel like they both exist and don't exist at the same time, changing shape depending on who's listening and what the mood is that week. The budgets sound polished, professional, and painfully empty, more like corporate spreadsheets than a real plan. He dodges cultural debates like they're untouchable.
Prediction for the UK election. You've been quite scathing about Sir Keir Starmer, but the polls show at the moment, certainly, if the election happens in the autumn, it seems likely, that he is heading to some kind of victory. What do you think that would mean for Britain? And do the Conservatives have any chance of stopping that?
I think it'll be catastrophic. I believe that Labour, like the Socialist parties in Canada, is absolutely overwhelmed by the diversity, equity, and inclusivity, victimizer narrative types.
What we get instead is pure vibes, hopeful talk, and tiny tax tweaks that squeeze the middle while giving the ultra-rich a friendly nod. It's the political version of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic and insisting everything's fine because the water looks calm. Meanwhile, Jordan Peterson's focus on competence and structured ambition puts a spotlight on Starmer's obsession with surface-level stability instead of real direction. Starmer governs like he's managing a dental clinic, not leading a country. Everything feels sterile, careful, and stripped of fire. There's no spark, no clear principle driving the decisions. Under his watch, the economy doesn't feel like the start of something bold. It feels like a dusty museum filled with broken calculators and recycled catchphrases that never quite add up. When it comes to culture, Starmer plays it so safe that Labour turns into the political version of gluten-free tofu, bland, shapeless, and apologising before it even speaks. He's terrified of upsetting anyone, so nothing strong ever lands.
Even if Starmer himself has any sense, which I doubt, the probability that his minions will lay waste to the UK it's certain in my estimation. There's so much behind the scene tyrannizing going on in the name of hypothetical utopian progress that it's almost unimaginable. I mean, the CCTVs in the ULEZ zones are a great example of that, and everything that's happened in London under Sadiq Khan, who's like poster boy for ideologically addled globalist utopians. And if the Labour gets in, and I can understand why the citizens of the UK are hungry for a change, if Labour gets in, it's like Venezuela, here we come.
Sure, avoiding conflict sounds smart, but pretending these issues don't exist isn't a game plan unless the goal is to bore voters into zoning out. Peterson, on the other hand, pushes clarity, conviction, and a clear moral frame. Starmer seems convinced that if he stays quiet long enough, no one will notice his party's moral compass got left behind in a pub somewhere near Camden. You can almost hear him whispering, "If I avoid eye contact with reality, maybe it won't ask me any hard questions." That quiet avoidance says everything. And then comes the control streak. Starmer, once praised as the great fixer of party democracy, now runs Labour like a closed-off members-only club for ultra-cautious technocrats. Candidate selection feels locked down tight, with barely any grassroots voice, and any real ideological pushback gets shut out fast. The left side of the party hasn't just faded, it's been edited out completely, like an old photo where inconvenient faces mysteriously disappear. What's left is a polished shell with no internal debate and no visible soul.
Starmer's posturing with regards to adolescence is only going to make that worse. It's bad psychology, and it's not only that, it's also oriented not to help young people, but to make Mr. Starmer feel a hell of a lot more secure in the idiot presumptions of his dimwit progressivism. So, and that's really the fundamental aim. It's like, how can we show we're right? And if we have to burn some young people on the pyre to make sure that our moral presuppositions can remain intact and our faith in our idiocy remains unchallenged, then we might as well teach kids using a Netflix series on.
Now stack that up against Jordan Peterson's respect for strong institutions and distributed power. Starmer isn't leading a movement, he's managing a brand. And not a living one either, a stiff corporate brand loaded with loyalty schemes and endless PowerPoint decks. For him, leadership isn't about vision, it's about control and optics. Under Starmer, Labour doesn't inspire, it audits. When it comes to foreign policy, he doesn't step out front, he falls in line. Global summits turn into dress-up moments where he plays international statesman while repeating lines straight from the latest approved memo. His worldview isn't driven by values, it's driven by press releases, careful phrasing, and trending hashtags. Britain under Starmer isn't being led, it's being managed from the sidelines. What Britain's getting instead is management by a middle manager with an inflated sense of adequacy. Jordan Peterson, a guy who never stops talking about responsibility and purpose, would probably tag Starmer as ambition without philosophy, a leader with no backbone chasing public approval like a golden retriever locked onto tennis balls. Even when clarity should be obvious, he's still sprinting after applause. Take housing, education, climate, the big stuff. Starmer somehow buries simple answers under layers of pointless complexity. Housing reform gets stuck in endless red tape. Education plans drown in performance metrics and buzzwords. Climate pledges are written so delicately, they manage not to upset energy donors or suburban drivers. It's policy built around risk charts instead of real conviction.
It's your desire to tar anyone who has, as I say, not got a voice and is wanting to make their voice heard as a violent far-right neo-Nazi seems to me to be a big error by Keir Starmer and others. Because, if you can't say, we recognize your deep, deep concerns about some things that have happened, including mass stabbings, terrorism, and much more. We understand your deep, deep concerns, and we are going to try to get onto this and on top of this. But there is no excuse to turn out on the streets and be violent against your Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors or any.
Governance under Starmer turns into a bland porridge of non-committal strategies. No edge, no soul, just bullet points pretending to be beliefs. Britain doesn't need a chief administrator with spreadsheets. It needs a leader with a backbone, a clear plan, and some visible urgency. Peterson didn't just break down Starmer's arguments on an intellectual level. He peeled back the image and exposed the empty space underneath the tailored suit and perfectly timed pauses. The illusion cracked, and there wasn't much holding it up. The real problem is the timing. This is all playing out while Britain faces pressure from every direction, a health system stretched thin, a housing market acting like a rigged board game, a younger generation staring down a future packed with stress and shrinking opportunity. And through all of it, Starmer responds with statements that land like a dial tone, flat, emotionless, and impossible to feel anything from. Peterson wouldn't even need to raise his voice for this one. Starmer defeats himself by turning into the political version of a ghost-written self-help book, packed with vague advice, scared of specifics, and destined to sit untouched on a shelf. Britain deserves more than a feel-good placebo wrapped in careful language. It needs leadership that pushes action, not someone quietly managing decline and calling it progress. What Peterson breaks down with philosophy, Britain is forced to live with day after day. Leadership gets reduced to polished slogans that sound tested but mean nothing. Belief gets replaced with tidy administration and safe wording. Starmer is what happens when a country in crisis hires a risk consultant instead of a prime minister with conviction.
Somehow navigate us to a better place, possibly. Is he going to be a transformative prime minister where we all wake up in 2-3 years and think, wow, the Starmer revolution? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's better. That's better than it might have been. Well, I spent quite a long time working with Democrats in the US, and I got very disillusioned about that, partly because they showed zero propensity to draw a line between the moderate Democrats and the radical.
Then the Peterson-shaped intellectual moment finally slams into number 10, splashing cold, uncomfortable reality all over the walls. No yelling, no theatrics, just calm, methodical pressure exposing every weak spot in Starmer's leadership. Peterson doesn't rant, he dissects. He lays it out slowly, like a textbook example, stripping away the image until there's nothing left but the truth. A polished suit, a law degree, a corner office, and still no visible backbone. He didn't need volume to make it land. All he needed was a mirror. Let's start simple. Peterson's worldview is built on one sharp idea. Leaders should take responsibility for what they do, not hide behind committees, phrases, or perfectly timed pauses. Starmer, on the other hand, treats responsibility like it's something to avoid the second things go sideways. NHS backlogs grow, the economy stumbles, pressure mounts, and suddenly he disappears behind reviews, inquiries, and lessons learned, like a stage trick gone wrong. It's leadership by vanishing act, hoping the problem fades before anyone notices who was holding the wand. Peterson's creed is simple: fix your life before you try to run a country. Starmer's version feels very different. Treat the nation like a messy group project and quietly hope someone else takes the blame when the presentation breaks down. Then there's vision, that thing real leaders are supposed to have. A sense of direction, a clear picture of where things are going. Starmer somehow manages to run both a party and a country with the inspirational energy of a printer setup guide. No spark, no urgency, just instructions no one asked for.
I suspect what will happen in the UK is the same thing that happened in Canada, which is that the right will split, reform, and reunite, and that would be the best bet. Maybe as a coalition government, I'm not staking my, what did you say? Not on either candidate. I've spoken with Nigel Farage and with Kenny Badenoch, and they're both credible people, and they have to fight it out amongst themselves. But I imagine the right will unite eventually again and hopefully reform.
While Peterson talks openly about structure, order, and moral clarity, Starmer seems convinced that soft optimism and management jargon can replace actual philosophy. One man uses dragons to explain chaos. The other dodges questions about rail disputes like they're mythical creatures he hopes will fly away. Peterson, whether people agree with him or not, builds coherence. Clean your room becomes clean your country. Get your house in order before telling others how to live. Now look at Starmer's house. It's not just messy, it's falling apart. Policies boarded up. Leaks everywhere. Contradictions stacked on contradictions. The air smells like leftover focus group talking points. If Peterson's worldview is a cathedral built on order, Starmer's looks more like a flat-pack cabinet held together with fear, guesswork, and a roll of duct tape. And here's the part that really rattles people. This clash wasn't about left versus right or personality versus personality. It was about substance versus emptiness, conviction versus caution. Peterson exposes something deeper, the danger of leadership that refuses to stand for anything solid. Starmer's entire approach rests on staying agreeable, staying polished, staying safely uncommitted. He treats controversy like quicksand, stepping lightly and hoping no one notices he's barely moving at all. Every answer feels pre-approved, stress-tested, and stripped of risk until there's nothing left to grab onto. Peterson comes from the opposite direction. He believes chaos is unavoidable, but pretending it isn't there only makes it worse. Instead of hiding from hard questions, he walks straight into them, names them, and forces people to deal with them head-on. That contrast is brutal. One side says clarity matters even when it's uncomfortable. The other says comfort matters, even when clarity disappears. Starmer's leadership feels like it's designed to survive headlines, not shape history. This is why the moment lands so hard. Not because Peterson wins a debate, but because he exposes the vacuum at the center of modern political management. When leadership becomes about tone instead of truth, process instead of purpose, the cracks don't just show, they spread. And Britain, watching all this play out, can feel it. The unease, the drift, the sense that something important is missing and no amount of careful wording is going to fix it. What makes this hit even harder is how obvious the contrast becomes once you see it. Peterson isn't chasing approval or trimming his words to fit a focus group. He's operating off a core belief system, one that stays steady even when people push back. That kind of consistency exposes just how reactive Starmer's style really is. Starmer moves like someone constantly checking the room temperature before speaking. If the mood shifts, so does the message. Principles get paused, reframed, or quietly shelved depending on headlines and polling graphs. It's leadership by adjustment, not direction. Peterson talks about meaning, responsibility, and consequences like they're non-negotiable. Starmer treats those same ideas like optional extras that might scare off undecided voters. One builds arguments from the ground up. The other rearranges language until it sounds safe enough to release. That gap matters. Because when pressure hits, when real decisions have to be made, vague positioning collapses fast. You can't manage your way out of moments that demand belief and backbone. Watching this unfold feels less like a debate and more like a reveal. Peterson isn't attacking. He's highlighting the absence of something vital, the missing center, the missing why. And once people see that, it's hard to unsee. The polished delivery, the careful pauses, the smooth tone, none of it fills the space where conviction should be. Britain isn't reacting to noise here, it's reacting to the silence underneath it all. And this is where the moment stops being theoretical and starts feeling personal. Because when leadership lacks conviction at the top, that uncertainty trickles down fast. People don't just feel confused, they feel unanchored. Policies blur together, promises lose weight, and trust quietly slips away. Starmer keeps offering reassurance without direction. Calm words, careful tone, zero urgency. It's like being told everything is under control while the warning lights stay on. Peterson, meanwhile, keeps hammering the same point. Order doesn't come from comfort, it comes from responsibility and hard choices. That difference isn't academic, it's practical. One approach asks people to wait patiently and hope for stability. The other demands effort, clarity, and accountability, even when it's uncomfortable. And in times of pressure, people notice which one actually prepares them for reality. Starmer's leadership style depends on smoothing edges and delaying confrontation. Peterson's philosophy says, delay is the problem. You don't solve chaos by managing optics, you solve it by naming the issue and acting on it. So when these two worldviews collide, the result feels jarring. Not loud, not chaotic, just deeply revealing. One side is built on belief and structure, the other is built on process and caution, and once that contrast clicks, it reframes everything people thought they were watching. This wasn't just commentary or debate. It was a spotlight on how different leadership looks when pressure stops being hypothetical and starts being real. And once that spotlight turns on, there's no hiding from it anymore. The audience doesn't just hear arguments, they feel the gap. One side speaks with weight and intent, the other floats in circles, hoping tone can replace direction. Starmer keeps leaning on process like it's a shield. Committees, frameworks, consultations, all neat, all orderly, all empty when people are asking for decisions. It's leadership that looks busy without actually moving anything forward. Peterson's presence makes that painfully clear. He isn't offering comfort, he's offering confrontation with reality. Responsibility first, meaning first, structure before slogans. That message lands hard because it doesn't flatter anyone, it challenges them. Starmer, by contrast, sounds like he's constantly negotiating with himself before answering. Every response feels softened, sanded down, and stripped of urgency. Nothing sharp enough to cut through the noise. And that's the real problem. In moments that demand firmness, softness feels like avoidance. When people sense hesitation at the top, confidence erodes fast. Not with outrage, but with quiet disappointment. This isn't about personality clashes or debate theatrics, it's about leadership under pressure. One worldview prepares people to face disorder head-on, the other hopes disorder can be managed away with better messaging, and the more this contrast plays out, the harder it becomes to ignore. Because when conviction meets caution, only one of them looks capable of carrying a country through uncertainty. Starmer isn't just a weak leader, he's the anti-leader. He's what happens when a spreadsheet goes to finishing school, learns to frown on cue, and practices sounding serious at press conferences. Where's the fire? Where's the conviction? Where's the unapologetic, "this is who I am" moment? Instead, he speaks in press releases, campaigns in riddles, and governs like he's terrified of a bad trust review. From Peterson's point of view, this isn't strategy, it's moral cowardice. A refusal to plant a flag anywhere meaningful because it might upset the broadcasters, the donors, or the carefully curated narrative. Leadership without risk, authority without belief, direction without commitment. And that's the core issue people can't unsee anymore. When pressure shows up, when clarity is demanded, all that's left is hesitation dressed up as professionalism. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this kind of leadership can actually carry a country forward? Or is it just managed decline in a polished suit? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you stand. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. I'll see you in the next video. This story is far from over.